Over the course of Tarkov's life, since the game has been playable to the masses, we've gotten a good idea as to how many maps will be released when the game finally goes 1.0. As far as we know, the only map that has not made it into the game yet is Terminal, which, if I had to take a guess, will release when Tarkov does eventually get to its 1.0 release date. In the meantime, BSG has made several attempts across most of the maps in the game to make them more cohesive, expand them, and just make them feel better to play. From the Underground and Reserve to multiple expansions on Customs, multiple times on both sides of the map, to even completely changing the topography of how Shoreline feels and making everything flow much nicer than what it was like before. And the most recent map to get this quality of life attention was Factory, and we're not talking about just updating some parts of the map. No, we're talking about a completely different map built from the ground up that still feels like old Factory. There are still the same points of interest, the same ebbs and flow in terms of how the map feels, and in general it should feel familiar, but there's enough new going on that it's worth having a conversation about and seeing how the community feels about it overall. Because there's a good chance that this will potentially be the final update to any of the old maps before we get Terminal added into the game. In terms of what's new with this Factory update, the main difference is that BSG wanted to bring the quality and attention to detail from the newer maps and expansions over to the oldest one in the game. So, there's a lot more subtle storytelling with this version of the map, done through graffiti, more dead PMC and scav bodies, as well as a more interesting, denser environment. This is something that can be seen done the best probably on either Streets of Tarkov or Ground Zero, as those two maps are pretty much the flagship of BSG's design and how they tell their stories of Tarkov through the level design. BSG also went out of their way to provide additional ways of navigating Factory via the tunnel system, and additional ways to get up and down the floors of the factory. They even added 2 brand new sections of the map that are actually outside, which for Factory is a first time ever in the history of the game. Although these 2 outside sections are rather small, it's still really fascinating and awesome just to see what Factory looks like from the outside. Other than that, the bridge that connects the offices and the center staircase has been expanded across almost the whole map, with more little side rooms to look through and find more loot. Sections of the underground are now flooded with water, making a clearly distinct wet sound when walking around, alerting those in the vicinity that you are directly below them. One other noticeable change was that most of the gate spawns have been pushed further back by adding another door or 2 you need to open in order to get into the factory, slowing down how quickly you are likely to jump into another PMC. It can still rarely happen, but the days of spawning either in glass hallway or at the gate at the end of it and then immediately dying are much less than they were previously. While the design, attention to detail, and overhaul to Factory is a nice refresher on the map, there are 2 personal issues I still have with this version. The first, and kind of obvious one, it's really dark, like to a level that rivals Interchange in how difficult it can be to spot other players and AI running around. Even hallways with overhead lights or parts of the factory exposed with complete skylight, it doesn't really make sense for the upper portions of the map to be so devoid of light when there are multiple sources of it across the map. The underbelly and tunnels should be dark, of course. Not only does it make sense lighting-wise, but thematically it adds a factor of tension and stress when walking around in the tunnels. With so many hallways, doors with cages, and corners that may or may not have someone behind them, having the lighting in the basement be below average just makes complete sense. I hope that the lighting above, though, does get a second pass, because when comparing certain parts of the map between day and night factory, there is barely a difference, if at all. And the second gripe I have with the new factory is how dense and busy the map feels now. One of my favorite aspects about Old Factory was how simple the map was, both in the layout and design, but also with how there just wasn't a ton of clutter or inanimate objects scattered throughout the map. When you looked down the 3rd floor office hallway, it was clear as day whether or not someone was there. Your eyes weren't really busy trying to fight through the clutter to see an enemy PMC on the other end. But just walking around even the open parts of the map now, there's just so much more stuff laying around. It's kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, yeah, it again adds layers of depth and lore to the map that makes it more open for interpretation, which is something modern BSG has become acutely excellent at. But at the same time, these elements come at the cost of functional gameplay and being able to simply and succinctly spot other threats roaming the map. Maybe with time and experience, this will become less of a problem, but at the moment there is enough visual clutter to make it difficult to spot enemies. Overall, the new factory is familiar to veteran players that it can still be fun and entertaining, but with enough newness to warrant classifying it as a new map. Players of Tarkov who maybe aren't as experienced with the game might be a little overwhelmed by how much is going on now, but with time we'll all get the hang of it. But this does beg a question I brought up earlier in the video. Is this the last time we will see an old map get some new life added to it before we get Terminal, the final map to be added into Tarkov? Nikita very recently just teased some photos online of a new part of a map. Whether this is a chunk of Terminal he is showing off, or another older map getting some extra additions is unclear, which, is on brand for him whenever he teases stuff. As badly as I would love to start seeing parts of Terminal and what we can expect from that, there is still an elephant in the room in regards to a map that could really use some attention sooner rather than later. Lighthouse is the bane of most players. It's the map with the second worst performance in the game behind Streets, and the layout is absolutely atrocious for questing, the spawns are horrific, and the literal lighthouse, the name of the map, is inaccessible unless you work all the way through to meeting Lightkeeper. Which makes this sting even more is that for a time you were able to run over to the lighthouse and explore it. The loot was pretty solid, and in general it was a fun risk to take because you were so exposed to getting there. But now you can't even get there, otherwise you die to Zerachi, Lightkeeper's dog. So perhaps this is a tease to something lighthouse related? Who knows? Would I be upset if this was the case? No. Again, this map really needs some attention. It's personally my least favorite map in the game by far, and if there's a chance of BSG making it better by any means, I'm all for it. In general, Factory got some lovely quality of life changes, bringing it to be more in line with how BSG has been creating their maps in 2024. And while it's not perfect and has some issues that will hopefully be ironed out, it still feels familiar and enjoyable to play. But the answer to the question of is Factory better? My answer is kind of simple. It's dark. My hope is that we begin to see the final pieces of the puzzle begin to be put in place. Terminal is around the corner, and with it, potentially the launch of Tarkov 1.0. We've never been closer to the finish line than now, and as excited as I am to see that map, Lighthouse is still in desperate need of some level of attention that Shoreline got earlier this year. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on the new factory, what your least favorite map is to play, and be sure to subscribe for more videos about the aspirations of the community in regards to the maps we engage with on a daily basis. I hope to see you in future ones.